Everyone, welcome back to Tactical Magic. This is Molly Mandelberg, your host. And today I have a special guest here with me, and we're going to be talking about something that could very well help your business if you have one. And if you don't have one yet, it's probably a good idea to start thinking about this just in life and in general. It's not just about mastering technology. It's not just about brand or messaging. It's not just about making more money. It's about showing up in a big way so your people can find you. This is about bringing your most wild and authentic self into the hustle and grind. Welcome to Tactical Magic, a business strategies podcast for the warrior goddess entrepreneur. I've got Angelo Roberts Jr. here with me today. Angelo is a first-time founder and CEO of OffSource and host of the Ramblings podcast. He heavily advocates for small business owners and other VAs everywhere, virtual assistants everywhere. So welcome to the show, Angelo.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an absolute wonder to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you here. So I have been working with, first, before we get started, tell us a little bit about how and why you started your business and what you do and how you help people.
So OffSource is a virtual assistant agency. We're actually what we call a service tech company because we combine what is traditionally just a service with a lot of technology integrated kind of ways. So what we do is we have a platform so that you're able to access your entire VA team so that you can get all of your office work done in a whole lot smoother fashion. And we offer a wide range of VA services because we're a team. And so being a team means that we can do a bunch of different things without any drop off. The reason I started it actually is a very close to home reason. I am the oldest of three siblings. Both my parents are small business owners. And so growing up, I really was able to see both of them struggle respectively in their own businesses. And so my mom being someone that actually had a staff, employees, W-2, and how she treated her people well versus my dad who did everything by himself. And so I was able to see literally in a divide what having employees can do for your time, for your ability. But I know that not every single owner can afford employees or necessarily even has the space for them. And so really being the oldest and being like naturally like an assistant, when you're the oldest, you have to take care of the young ones. And so it's really a culmination of like the way I helped my parents, right? Especially being the tech savvy one, setting computers up for my dad, doing like research, showing him how to do spreadsheets. It really fed into just me wanting to do business growing up. And so I've always looked at different opportunities for business. And so OffSource is really my way of helping the world the same way I was helping my parents, which really ended up being when I started working at this dog sitting company, seeing that this was an actual need that needed to be filled outside of my parents. And so that's where I started jumping in, and I've been a VA ever since.
I love that. So you saw a gap and you learned how to fill it. And not only that, you were seeing that gap with your parents. And so it's almost like a strength that you've been building your whole life that you finally realized, oh, hey, there's a market for this. And I can be the one to go and fill that gap in the marketplace. And that's such a cool way to sort of find your niche and like move into the world of helping people and making a difference, which is so important. So tell us a little bit about why having a virtual assistant can be such a game changer. I mean, you touched on it a little bit there, but what are you seeing for businesses when they finally decide to lean into the idea of getting support?
Outside of the fact that we're now living in a post-COVID world and we have to now work virtually, having a VA works in a number of reasons. One, if you're a small business owner and you're inside your house, and you like a lot of owners are working outside their house, you can't bring another person into your house to work. I mean, you can, but you're not really going to bring like another admin. And especially once you start getting a bunch of different positions, it would be really hard to have everybody actually in-house. And so having a VA or a team of VAs really is able to, one, help keep things affordable so you don't need to have all that extra overhead. We are 1099, so you don't have to worry about the taxes, any of the extra, if you fired somebody having to do unemployment, there's a lot of like paperwork headaches that are no longer involved. And you can use this as you need us. We're month to month. Some some agencies may make you sign like a contract for like a certain amount of time. But if you work with smaller VAs or our company, we go month to month. And so that means if you don't have a lot of work, you're not obligated. A lot of small business owners are like, oh, snap, we're busy. We need an employee. And then they get an employee and then they stop being busy. And now the employee's like, I still need to get paid. So it really takes out every single headache you can think of in terms of hiring, especially since we are our own company and we have a reputation to uphold. You know, people are like, oh, how do you know if you're hiring? Right. Well, we're a company. The company's purpose is to make money. So we need to vet our hires. Whereas when you're hiring, their incentive is to just make money for themselves. So it really takes out every pain that you can think of when it comes to hiring.
That's awesome. And yeah, just to speak to like the user experience, I think there's this identity that a lot of us take on. I'm speaking to as myself and also for most of my clients, that many of us are heart-based practitioners. We're trading in services, not so much in products. So we don't have a lot of inventory and things to move, but we take on this identity of the solopreneur, and there becomes this almost ego involved in, I can do it all myself. I can learn how to do it myself. I can figure it out. And I'm the only one who will ever be doing it right. So I have to keep doing it. Otherwise it will, falter and fail. And it's sort of an identity crisis to say, you know what, actually, I'm going to have somebody here to support me who's going to do these parts of my business or my work that are A, no longer fun for me, or B, could easily be done by someone else and free up more of my time to do the parts of my business that I actually love doing. So one of the things I encourage people to do, and I've done another podcast or two about virtual assistants, and if anybody wants to go back and catch Sam Kabert's episode, I also did one just called Hiring a VA, which is about how to sort of go through the process of figuring out what you're even going to delegate to your people. But the first step of that is figuring out what are the things in my business, A, that I'm tired of doing, or B, that someone else could do as good or better than I could. And there's a lot of places as a solopreneur where we try to fill the gap of the thing that needs to be done in our business, even though we're not really that skilled at it. For example, copywriting may be a place that's really hard and sticky for some people, but they feel like they have to do it in order to market their business and show up, when they could actually easily outsource that to somebody who's way better at copywriting than they are. I'll raise my hand there. I'm a pretty great copywriter and available for hire for that for a small number of my clients. But the thing is to start looking at that. Where are the places that there could be somebody who comes in? And I think there's a story in our heads that we have to be at a higher level of success to be able to afford such a thing, or we need to be more organized to be able to even do that successfully. And I think one of the great things, especially about having an agency of virtual assistants or a virtual assistant who's been one before, is they kind of help you delegate to them by getting in and learning about your business and knowing more about some of the systems than you do. So you actually have somebody teaching you how to train them in a way to do the jobs of your business that are harder to do. Can you tell us a little bit about that onboarding process and like what are some of the skill sets that your team provides?
I think that's very important. Like a very well-seasoned VA or just the team itself will make sure that they are increasingly trying to support you further. Yeah. What we do during our onboarding is very important, which is an execution meeting. And the reason we call it an execution meeting is because I don't like wasted time in meetings. And so execution meetings really drive home what you're going to be getting and what that actually looks like played out. A lot of times when services are going on their way, unless it's something very specific, you can fly under the radar blind. So when we have our process, the execution meeting is designed to let the client know exactly what's going to be happening. So whether that's going to be that we need access to their CRM, what passwords we need, how long it's going to take for us to turn this project around, what we're expecting it to look like when it's done. So for example, it could be just the idea of it being a populated CRM, but we want to know, what does that look like? Now, what are we doing after with that CRM? Are you going to be emailing into these people? We always try to stay ahead of the game and find out the reasoning why that they're doing something. Because if you find out the why, you can find out the follow-up. Because if they're doing something, there's a reason that they're doing it. And you might be able to help with that, with those second, third, fourth, fifth phases and steps. And so that's why the execution meeting is extremely important for our onboarding process, because it allows for them to be visual in what they're going to have done, as well as be clear in what they're actually going to be doing in the future. Because they always like to say, hey, this isn't something that I need now, but for down the line, like this is something that I think about. So it's on their brain, but they're not readily thinking about it. So a good VA or agency will always make sure that they're on top of their client. Like they grow with them. They know, hey, listen, you're trying to run an ad campaign. We might want to say, hey, can we do graphic design for you as well? You may not be the best at copywriting, but are you also the best at making the graphics stand out? So we really try to make sure that we're getting a full, thorough understanding of the client.
Yeah. And what their needs are. I love that. And I'll give an example from my own experience. I've gone through 4 or 5, maybe 6 virtual assistants. I've been with the one that I'm with right now for a little over a year, and I love her. But she handles almost everything having to do with my podcast. For example, I am producing this podcast right now. We're recording it, but as soon as it's over, I put the files in the right folder and I forward the email that you filled out with all your information about you to her. And she literally does everything else. She edits the podcast. She puts the images together. She publishes them on the right date. She takes the template we've created for forwarding the episode to my guests. She creates social media clips for it to go online and schedules those out. And then I just have to forward the email to my guests so that you can know how to share it on the right day and yada, yada. So I don't do anything else but create my podcast now. And that was my vision starting out with my podcast, was like, dang, this is a lot of work. And I have 2 podcasts now. If I was doing every single one of those tasks myself, I would not have time to run the rest of my business. I would not have time to serve my clients or launch new programs or create new programs or make art or travel the world or be in a relationship or have friends and family. It would be exhausting and overwhelming. And so paying someone to handle the parts of that I got tired of doing, that yes, I could do well, but they weren't lighting me up. They weren't serving me. They weren't filling my cup energetically as the thing in my business that I just love to do. So I hand them off to somebody else who can do them just like I can. And part of my process for onboarding someone like that is starting an SOP folder. And that could be as simple as just writing down what are all the tasks that you do in your business. And then sometimes if it's a complicated task, like how do you like to send your newsletter out to your email list? You can turn on Zoom by yourself. You can screen share. You can even turn off your video if you want and screen share and record yourself doing a task in your business that you do, talking your way through why you do each step. Here's where I change the margin. Here's where I put the picture. Here's the folder you get the picture from, every single step of that. And as soon as you finish doing that task that time, you save that recording in a folder and you name it what it is. Me setting up my newsletter for my list on this platform. And that starts to become your like master folder of training anyone. So if my virtual assistant decides, she doesn't want to do it anymore, I've now created this entire framework that somebody else could come in and say, okay, these are the main tasks that I do. Here's a video or a write-up of exactly how to do that task for this person in this business. And I can just come in and fulfill that job because it's literally like a training manual now for my people.
I like how you said screen record, because we're actually I'm using Notion of building out like a training module kind of thing using like that screen recording method. I don't know if you're familiar with the platform, but we're using Descript and they even auto transcribe. So shout out Descript for being so cool too. I love their editing platform, by the way.
Awesome. Yeah. And that transcription also you can pull and that can become the written version of the thing. So yeah, it's not that complicated to start systemizing your business in such a way that somebody else could come in and support you. And then that sort of brings us to the bigger concern for most people, which is, I'm barely paying my own bills. How am I going to pay somebody else? And I'm already running out of time to do all these things. How am I going to train somebody to do it? So we talked about how you can train somebody to do it. You just have to start systemizing that process as you're doing the tasks yourself. But the thought of hiring somebody new and bringing somebody on your team I love that your company doesn't force a big commitment, because some people might just need a little help right now. But it's
Mhm.
also like, how is it gonna help you grow? If you were spending, you out there listening, if you were spending less time doing all those menial tasks, would you have more time to go live on social media, or have your own podcast, or network with people who might have speaking gig opportunities for you, or actually just do more sessions with your clients because you have the time to do it, and that builds more referrals, more income, more clout, all of those beautiful things. So it's almost like, do we actually have time to wait any longer to get this kind of support? Oh, and there was one
I agree.
example I wanted to give. When I forget to record more podcast episodes, my assistant is the one saying, "Hey, these are what we have lined up. Do you have one for this date yet?" And I get to be like, "Oh crap, let me put that together for you." But she's the one holding me accountable, because the podcast is basically her job. And that's not on me to worry about when the next episode is happening, or who's going to be on the show, or how that's all occurring, because that's something she's helping manage me for. So having the right team is actually going to help you hold yourself accountable in a different way, because they're aware of what needs to get done in a way that maybe you're not tracking everything as well as you could be, because that becomes
I
their
like how
job.
you brought out that moment of they're holding you accountable, right?
Yeah.
Because I think one of the big things is, excuse me, when we are like thinking, oh, if I'm going to get a VA, or if I'm going to hire, like, what am I going to then do with that time, and how am I going to make more money, and how, like, the best use of that time? I think that there's a small underlying where people are like, they kind of know they may not use that time to the best, right? Like, if you're using that time for, say, like Netflix, or for like just kind of like hanging out, it's not going to have the same kind of a value proposition, unless like your personal relationships are like, I'm not saying they're not that important, but we're like, in the terms of business, like, if you're paying to be able to increase your personal relationships, it's not going to have the same value. And I think a lot of people, when they're like, hey, if I had an employee, I would do, more meetings and more sales. But in reality, they know that they would probably end up watching more Netflix if they didn't have to do that.
Yeah.
where that, I think, also is some kind of draw or pause when they're trying to pull the trigger on, do I really need to hire? Because it's, how organized am I? How am I already using like my current time? But like you said, having like that team that holds you accountable really is able to like null and void that, and really keep you on task and growing.
Yeah, exactly. And I will just say, to advocate for the people who think they would be wasting that time, I think as a society, we are really heavily programmed to not take time for ourselves. And I'm not saying we should be watching more Netflix, but how many times have you walked your dog this week? How much
Mhm.
have you actually just sat down at the table and played cards with your family? Like, what are the things that could be filling your cup and making you a better person, or a happier family member, or a more loving and compassionate partner, that taking the stress out of your business in this way could actually facilitate a lot more joy and a lot more pleasure and a lot more playtime in your life. And that could be a good thing for your business. It could actually make
Mhm.
you a lot more able to sit down and do the money making, income generating activities that right now feel overwhelming because there's too much other stuff on your plate. So there's a lot of ways that that could play out.
I 100% advocate for self-care as being like a needed business expense, because
Mhm.
at the end of the day, you want the business to grow, and the business can't grow without you. And if
Yeah,
you're not growing, the business isn't going to grow.
totally. I love that. Awesome. So, who's a good candidate out there to start getting in contact with you and looking at what this could be like?
Like an ideal, like, okay, so our ideal like client profile, if you will, is a small business owner. They have like usually no employees. We love working with the solo owners, because we're their first people. We love, and they really appreciate it. Like, they are our core clientele. Like, solo business owners go super hard, especially like within the service-based industry. And we do not discriminate, but we do work primarily with local Black and brown businesses. It's just they don't have the same resources, they don't have the same access to their counterpart business owners, and we provide those kinds of services that they don't necessarily have access or affordable access to, if you will. And so we really like to work with our local small Black and brown business owners in the service industry.
Awesome. Love that. So tell us a little bit more about your podcast, the Ramblings podcast.
So I am also the host of the Ramblings. It's like my little get it off my chest kind of thing. It's really like my leverage. I started it because I'm a huge Gary Vee fan, and I'm like, I got to do content, got to think of a long form thing, podcast. Jumped into it, and it's now kind of grown into being like my outlet of just my voice, because I just feel like I'm not heard, and so I want to be heard. It serves as like my content base, and it serves as my leverage for wanting to talk to people. Believe it or not, a young Black person is not the top of the totem pole for everyone to talk to, but if you ask them to be on a podcast, they love to spill the beans. And so I use it to really, whenever I introduce myself to somebody and I'm like, oh, I would love to pick their brain, no one wants to like really have a pick the brain session. So I just really invite them onto the podcast and selfishly ask them questions that I would like, hey, listen, I would like to learn from you. I use the podcast to learn from people.
That is a smart life hack right there. Hopefully people out there are listening. If you want to get a conversation with somebody and ask them all the questions you've been wanting to ask them, invite them on your podcast. They don't even need to know if it's launched yet.
Shout out to my mom for like solidifying that idea. So like I had thought of it, and then my mom was like, you have a podcast, you should leverage that for like getting clients and like letting people know, like, if you want to talk to them, because people don't want to talk, but they'll be on a podcast. And I'm like, I had that idea, but thank you for confirming it.
That's awesome. Good job, Mom. That's awesome. So what are the ways that people can get a hold of you? Because I imagine there's some people out there listening like, okay, this is a sign. If you are feeling like this is a sign that it's time for you to finally get support in your business and you're ready to at least explore the idea of somebody taking some of that work off your plate, maybe helping you run your business more smoothly, maybe helping you do some things that you haven't even had the time or space to get into yet because you're not sure how to navigate that when you're already so busy. This is how you get a hold of Angelo.
Offsource.tech. Go to get started. It'll bring you to create your free profile so you can get access to the app. Offsource.tech. Or you can hit my personal email, Angelo Roberts at offsource.tech. Offsource. You can find us Offsource everywhere. You can Google it, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, everything's Offsource HQ.
Awesome. And you've shared a lot of magic with us today, but are there any last words of wisdom that you want to leave people with?
You have to enjoy the moment. You have to be present and very much enjoy your process. I get worked up all the time, and then I realize I've been doing this for 2 years and haven't done anything else. And so that in and of itself is just a lucky and a blessing, and gratitude. It takes you a long way in business.
Hell yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much for being on the show, Angelo.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. And thank you everyone out there for listening. Don't forget to go to wildheartsriseup.com if you want to learn more about me and my business. And don't forget to go to offsource.tech to start exploring what getting a virtual assisting team on your side would be like. And whatever happens, keep asking big questions and taking bold action because you are here for a reason. Bye.